towards the end of this segment, we'll also talk about when should you eat. But it's not just about how much should you eat. It's a combination of what do you eat, how much of it do you eat, and when do you eat it. Because those are the big three variables that are going to control almost everything that your body does in response to food. So each of them can be optimized. You don't have to always do the most optimal thing, but if it didn't make a difference to you and you have two choices and you don't care which one you take, why don't you take the one that gives you a slight advantage? And if you build that kind of thinking into your life to say, you know, today there were many different paths I could have taken, and I just always took the one that didn't cost me anything but gave me an advantage. It might only be 1%, but it's like an interest rate on a bank account. I only got 0.5%, but it compounds. So every time you save a little bit of energy for something that actually mattered, you win. And when you build that into your lifestyle, into the way you eat, the way you sleep, everything you do, it becomes effortless and really invisible to you. But suddenly at the end of the day, you have a dividend. This is the time and the energy you get back that you didn't have before. When it comes to this bulletproof diet and choosing proteins, this is one of the areas where so many people make mistakes because we've been taught a protein is a protein. So protein's good. That means I can eat gluten. It's a protein. In fact, you'll find a lot of vegetarian things that are protein replacements. Well, they have enough protein in them, and the fact that it's gluten, which has been shown in lots of studies to be inflammatory and to be what I would just call a suboptimal protein for humans, that'll be equated logically with something like what we have over here, grass-fed lamb, for instance. So these simply aren't the same thing. They're not the same food, and they do different things in the body. When you look at the bulletproof diet and this idea that some are going to be less inflammatory or more nutritious than others, on this side you have really the good stuff. If it ate grass, if it was pastured, you get an advantage. And people ask questions like, why would pastured pork? And pastured means that it lived on a pasture, not a feedlot, and that it actually ate what the animal normally would eat. Pigs, though, if you've ever seen pigs, they'll eat kind of anything. So it's a question of what did the pig eat at that farm? Am I picky? Sorry, maybe. But if you eat pork from an animal that ate low-quality grain at a feedlot, the things that grow on the grain, mostly a fungus called fusarium, it bioaccumulates in the pig's fat. This isn't well known, but there are studies on PubMed that talk about the seasonality of pork. It turns out winter pork and spring pork that ate stored grain, has 5 or 10 times the amount of toxin in its flesh. And people who eat more of that during those times tend to get more diseases that are correlated with those toxins. So this isn't just like, oh no, it might be bad. It's that doctors and epidemiologists discovered this relationship. So what that means to you is the quality of your food is directly based on what your food ate. Plants eat soil. They eat air, they eat sunshine, they eat water. The quality of those things affect your plant foods, and your meat foods, the quality of the plants or even other proteins that they eat affects you. So what I'm saying in this infographic here is stick to the stuff that ate really good stuff and the things that have the right kinds of protein. The other reason that you'd see pork over here is that pork, even when it's fed the perfect sort of clean diet, still has a lot of the omega-6 oils, which can be more inflammatory than the saturated fats or the omega-3 oils. That said, I cure my own bacon at home, and it's amazing, and there's nothing wrong with bacon. But go back to that discussion we had yesterday about cooking techniques. So if you're going to take your bacon and fry it at high temperature so it spits all over, a little bit of smoke coming off it, it's nice and crunchy, you're pretty much destroying those fats. So when you cook your bacon, turn it down. Let it cook a little bit longer so the fat's rendered and the bacon's cooked, but it's not super crunchy and crispy. I know crispy bacon is delicious, it's just inflammatory. The quality of your thinking of how you feel based on well-done bacon versus medium or lightly cooked bacon is noticeable. Do a test. Have bacon only for breakfast. Do it too much one time and do it less cooked another time, and you'll feel different later. And that's normal. That's how biology works. The other two things that work really well are hydrolyzed collagen and whey protein isolate. The new bulletproof diet includes whey concentrate, and there's big debate amongst those who eat whey about the right kind of whey to do. What I did in order to get good quality things, I put together upgraded collagen, which comes from grass-fed, low-temperature, enzymatically processed collagen. So you want collagen in the body as a way of hydrating your tissues and as a building block for things like bones and for the fascia that holds your organs together. I am unusually flexible, and part of the reason for that is that I make collagen a regular part of my diet. This is a great protein source because collagen doesn't have the inflammatory proteins that whey contains. But whey protein also has some things that collagen and other proteins don't have in it. A lot of people who work out a lot will say, I gotta have my whey. And in fact, some of the really big ripped bodybuilders do that, but they get inflammation around the midsection from too much whey. So the way that I recommend you use whey is you go for very high quality whey protein, and you do it only 2 tablespoons a day. And you're using whey there for its immune stimulating and for its antioxidants and basically liver qualities, in that whey helps to form glutathione in the liver. So this is a very powerful combination of not just whey, it's grass-fed, low-temperature processed whey that came not as a cheese byproduct, but as something that came directly from the milk to the whey factory. It's kind of funny, you go back 20 years ago, the people who make cheese were dumping their whey in rivers and killing fish. Whey was an industrial byproduct. And then someone figured out that you can actually eat that stuff, and it actually does good things. And suddenly the whey protein industry was born. There's just a little problem with that. Not all milk that goes into making cheese is the same. Not all whey that comes out of a cheese plant is the same. And we have a whole huge different set of processing techniques you can do that affect how the whey affects you. Most whey, in my experience, isn't a great long-term protein source, but using whey as a way to help your body get rid of toxins in the liver and to help your body have a healthy immune system is a really good idea. Just don't make that mistake of over-consuming whey. From a fish perspective, I'm scared about the state of the oceans on the world right now. Not only do we have new questions about radioactive fish because of the nuclear accident in Japan, but we've already had issues around mercury, and it's been getting worse for the past 20 or so years. The reason it's been getting worse is that we have an enormous amount of coal being burned to generate electricity. Coal naturally contains mercury, so the smoke from coal goes into the atmosphere, and we're dumping tons and tons of the mercury that comes out in rain, basically into the oceans. When fish eat plankton and they eat low on the food chain, mercury bioaccumulates. It stays in the fat, it stays in the tissues, and then when we eat fish, like swordfish or tuna or shark in particular, we're getting a ton of mercury, enough that if you're pregnant, you actually shouldn't even eat this at all. There are warnings even here in San Francisco. Do not eat fish consumed from the bay more than once a week. Those warnings translate to me as maybe I ought to just eat it less than once a week. But at the same time, wild-caught fish gives you the essential fatty acids, EPA and DHA. So if you're trying to optimize, what do? You don't avoid all seafood, because when you go to a restaurant, seafood's oftentimes your best choice. If all they have is industrial beef that was fed some combination of antibiotics and corn and soy and GMO things, well, then what you should do is you should choose an optimal fish. So here, things like Anchovies, haddock, sole, sardines, and sockeye salmon are really good choices. If you go down here to the high mercury or farm seafood, you end up with this Norwegian farm salmon problem where it's almost like eating feedlot beef, where the fatty acid in those salmon is not right. They don't even have the right color until you add the coloring agents to them. So it's tough. If you're sitting down in a restaurant, what are you going to do? Well, order the wild-caught fish is a pretty good answer. That's what I do most of the time. And if it has mercury in it, yesterday we talked about detoxing remedies. My assumption is that I'm going to get more toxins than cavemen did. Because as much as I love my paleo brothers out there, the cavemen didn't deal with some of the stuff. They weren't burning that much coal back then. So the fish they ate was pretty much fish. And here we end up saying these are fish that are relatively safe. And you can even see if you look at the sockeye salmon at the top here, the Copper River sockeye salmon is one of the really good ones. It's got like a nice rich orange-red color. And if you go and you buy a farm salmon, it doesn't have that same hue even. It's more like a pale orange. And you can see a difference, very thin marbling of fat on here, but this is the most valuable fat you can get from fish. Whereas the stuff you'll buy at a typical sushi restaurant is not nearly as marbled like that. It has big white stripes in it. Those are actually not the right kind of fat, and there's more of it. So who would have thought that it made such a big difference? We also go over here to the the pastured chicken and turkey. Why would they be over here on the orange side of things versus the green side? Any guesses from the audience? This always throws people for a loop because we all on chicken breasts, you know. I eat my kale, I exercise every day, I floss and eat my chicken breast. I must be a good person. But because they're eating corn. That's one of the reasons. Dried corn, the vast majority of corn accumulates stuff that accumulates in chickens, but even if they're like outdoor chickens that do amazing outdoor chicken bird things, I've spent like 2 years on the quest for the perfect chicken. It's like, oh, let's feed it some coconut so it'll have more saturated fat, and let's let it, live in nature and massage it gently every day. Even when you do all that, the fatty acid ratio in the chicken, it comes out to have a ton of omega-6 oil. And the bottom line there is we're not that related to chickens who are more related to dinosaurs than to people. So can we eat a chicken? Yeah. We can definitely survive on chickens. Do they give us the right kind of fat? Not necessarily. So it tends to bump up your ratio of omega-6s. So if you're going to eat birds like that, take the skin off. The advice there that you got from your mom, the skinless chicken breast, that would be the way to get your protein from the chicken.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about omega-3 versus omega-6, and sometimes too much omega-3 can also, give you bad effects as well. How do you know exactly where you're shooting for personally? Is there some tests or something you can do to know if you should be acting to reduce omega-6 or boosting omega-3?
Unquestionably, if you live in the West, you should be acting to lower omega-6 in your diet. In fact, it's so common that you're not going to be able to eat no omega-6, and that would be harmful. You need very vanishingly small amounts of it, so I make choices to eliminate omega-6 wherever I can. And you can get a blood test that looks at the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 in your blood. The average American is 40 to 1. That's 40 inflammatory omega-6s to 1 omega-3. My last one was 1.28 to 1. The anti-aging crowd oftentimes says, well, our target's 4 to 1, but it's hard to do. And the reason it's hard to do is that if you don't consider that saturated fat is not a 6 or a 3, then it's very hard to do. But because we bump up the butter in the diet, that means you are still getting some omega-3 from the grass-fed butter. You're getting your egg yolks from healthy chickens, and you're getting even omega-3 from the grass-fed meats. They're full of omega-3. Grass-fed beef has a profile that looks more like salmon than you would expect. So when you do that and you supplement with some of the supplements we talk about, like krill oil or fish oil, you tend to get enough omega-3, but not excessive, and the saturated fat becomes a part of the food there. I recommend getting that test when I work with WellnessFX, one of the online testing companies that's part of the panel that I get. So I track mine, and I'm always less than 2. If you eat a ton of nuts, you're likely to change that ratio. You might be up to 4 or 6 or 10 to 1. And this is one of the reasons that nuts are a good snack. But if you want to make a meal of nuts, like I did when I was a raw vegan, those amazing like dishes of cashews and avocados that are soaked and blended and everything else, taste really good, but the fatty acid content wasn't quite right. So
some great questions in, Dave, from all our internet audience. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing, and keep them coming. I think we'll talk about bulletproof coffee later on. I know we're getting a lot of questions about that. But on this particular subject, Rolling Kidney Stones is asking, the proteins flow chart is very meat heavy. Any recommendations for vegetarians?
Eat meat. I don't actually say that lightly. I've been a vegetarian, I've been a raw vegan, but there's 2 reasons that you might want to be a vegetarian. One of them is that you care about animal suffering. So if you're concerned about animal suffering, think about the world as a system. So you're going to eat, let's say, one of those tofurkeys made out of tofu. So let's look at where the tofu in that came from. Well, it came from soybeans. Where'd they come from? They came from a soybean crop. How many animals were killed to make that field? A lot. And then, now, how did we harvest the soy? Did a tractor go through and chop up the turtles and the bunnies and the grasshoppers and the worms? And did we put monoculture in and destroy the soil in that region by over-farming it to make soybeans? The deaths per tofu burger are shocking and astounding, and actually, if you're a Buddhist, particularly traumatic. But if you eat a pound of grass-fed cow every single day, you'll kill 0.7 animals a year, including the entire supply chain for your food. Unless your cow stepped on a frog one morning, your cow didn't kill anyone. And there's a great TED Talk on this. You don't have healthy soil unless you have large-hooved animals plowing up the soil. This is why in the U.S. we had millions of buffaloes. When we shot all the buffaloes, we had the Dust Bowl. We didn't know this until relatively recently. When you take away the big hooved animals, the algae in the soil forms a crust, and then water comes down and it doesn't penetrate the algae, so the water runs off, and you get desertification, which is a huge problem in the U.S. So what do? We replace the deserts with soybean farms. But if you would like to support both less animal death and healthier soil, choosing a vegetarian plant-based protein lifestyle isn't the right environmental choice or the right animal suffering choice for you. One of the reasons that I've thought so much about this is that when I spent time in Tibet, going to Mount Kailash, I spent 10 days at a Buddhist monastery, and they had a no-killing rule, and so I honored that, and I was vegetarian for that time. And then I went to this amazing monastery, like carved in the side of a big cliff, and there on a flagpole was a yak skin. And so I asked the head lama, the guy, I said, "You're a hypocrite. You say no killing, and you have animal skins up here. What did you do with the animal?" He said, "Oh, we ate it." And I said, "No killing? Like, seriously?" And he just laughed. He literally laughed. And he said, "One death feeds everyone." And that changed my way of thinking about this. So I would really encourage you to think about that as a member of society and as someone on planet Earth. If you're vegetarian to save animals, eating more vegetables will not save animals. When you make those vegetables, you're displacing animals, and when you harvest those vegetables, you're actively killing animals, and you're depleting the quality of the soil here. If we are going to live on this earth in balance with the environment, and I don't mean like the hippie kind of balance, I mean like the math kind of balance. What we're talking about there is consuming some meat from healthy animals that lived near your home, which is why the vast majority of the meat that I eat when I'm home was grown within 5 miles of my house. I know the people who grew it, I know what the animals ate, and they're in my freezer, and they're delicious. And no other animals died in the preparation of my food. So that's one of kind of the long answer to a question, but think about these things. It matters.
So Dave, excuse me, thank you. There is a lot of great discussions going on in the chat rooms.
I didn't make a few people angry, did I?
But people are interested in, if you could say again, what that TED Talk was, or what people should search for to find that one.
I am forgetting the guy's name right now, but he talks about elephants. If you do a TED Talk for elephants, soil, desertification, I'm certain you'll find it.
Okay.
And this is one of the more disturbing TED Talks I've ever heard, to be honest, because the guy starts out saying in the 70s, we were trying to preserve the land, so we killed tens of thousands of elephants in Africa to make sure that they wouldn't overgraze, and then it turned into a desert because we got rid of the animals that were destroying, or not destroying, but were pawing up the soil. So we just didn't understand the system of an ecosystem. And right now, we're understanding the impact that farming is having on animals and on us. And so we need some farming, and we need some animals, and we need to be rotating the animals and the farms back and forth so that the soil will not die. When the soil dies, we will die.
Proteins. This is an interesting one regarding the omega-6 that we were discussing just now. AJ Noel is asking, in regard to the omega-6, does this also apply to primrose oil supplements for hormone balance in women?
If primrose oil works for you, then go ahead and go with it. The N=1 experiment is very important. You take small amounts of primrose oil, and it's generally packaged appropriately away from oxygen. So it's not my first go-to oil. I would look at krill oil for hormone balancing in women, but if primrose oil is the one that works for you because of the GLA in it, there's nothing wrong with using it. It's just not the first place to go.
Is there another continuum for grass-fed beef? Basically, like, when you go to Whole Foods, there's like step 1 through 5, and there's like some that are pasture, some that are corn, some whatever. And why does corn-fed beef taste so good?
There is a continuum. You want grass-fed and grass-finished beef. It takes 30 days of feeding a grass-fed cow corn before it becomes a corn-fed cow. At the end of 30 days, the fatty acid in its tissues are very different. The reason corn-fed beef tastes good is that the tissue gets marbled with fat. Essentially, you're making the cow diabetic. And that nice fat marbling tastes good because fat tastes good. Your body, like the automatic systems in your body, are craving fat. And the more fat you put in your diet, like with bulletproof coffee and things like that, the less you'll crave that. And I can tell you, I don't like the taste of corn-fed meat at all. I used to just love it. The fat in it doesn't taste good because my body's trained to eat good quality fats. And since there isn't a starvation of fat in my body, I'm picky about my fats. Like, it better be a really good fat if I'm going to eat it. Otherwise, I will naturally, as an animal, pass on it. The same way that you can take 2 different piles of food and animals will naturally select the best pile of food if they're well fed. So this is an example. It's just your body's craving fat. That's why you want corn-fed. But when you've had enough fat, you don't want the corn-fed anymore. You want the grass-fed. The other question, before we move on and get into the guts of the bulletproof diet, is why is cheese over here? This makes me sad. You guys feel kind of sad that the cheese is over there? Here's why. When you make cheese, you take milk from a cow. The protein in milk, the casein, will get about 60% of the toxins from the cow's diet go into the casein directly. So it's a way of concentrating a lot of what the cow ate. So you're getting some protein, but the protein in there, casein itself, in many people, when it degrades in the gut, it goes to casomorphin. It's related to like a gluteomorphin, and yes, it sounds like morphine because it's an opiate. So when it's incompletely digested in the gut, it has an opiate-like effect, which is one reason we like cheese so much. So it's kind of the same thing as our friends who maybe are taking opiates. So cheese causes enormous food cravings. When you eat cheese, your body says, wow, I got some protein, I got some fat, and that's why you like the cheese. It's got that fat in there, it's creamy and it's delicious. But what made the cheese? What made the cheese was you set it here and you let it basically start to spoil, and that's the process of cheese making. What happens is this fungus that's on the cheese, or this bacteria, depending on the kind of cheese, says, this is my cheese. And then it basically says, let me show you it's my cheese, and it puts out toxins to kill the other stuff. And the other stuff says, no, no, this is my cheese. And it puts out toxins to kill the other stuff. So there's basically like a little battle going on for domination of the cheese. And what makes the flavor in the cheese is what's left after the sort of the fight between these two things. And for us, antibiotics come from molds. But molds generate chemical defense systems to mark their food as their food and to prevent competition. This is natural selection at work here. When you eat that, your liver then gets all that stuff and does something with it. Few people know that there's a toxin that's been identified and quantified called roqueforticin because it comes in Roquefort cheese. Some people can eat some cheeses with zero food cravings, zero brain fog, zero sagging of their skin. But for most cheese, for most people, it greatly increases food cravings. It makes people more tired, it makes them cranky, it makes them less focused, and it makes them inflamed. So you owe it to yourself to try eliminating cheese. If you are going to eat cheese, eating cheese, and I don't have it on here, but you could try a raw goat cheese. Goat cheese tends to be less of a problem. So feta that's been less fermented, I guess that's the wrong word for it, less cured maybe, would be a good way to go. And see how you do. And don't mess around with cheap cheese. It's not worth it. You know, the stuff from Costco is probably not good. Sorry, what?
What about the hard cheeses like Parmesans and same thing?
Those ones are actually worse.
Even with?
Yeah. They taste good though.
Is it safe to say if there was a bulletproof cheese, like it'd be on there?
Yeah.
You've explored it?
In exhaustive detail. I would really like there to be one. And there's a couple recipes. I want to say I have it on the blog. You can do something that's like a nacho cheese sauce. The trick there is a little bit of salad onion and a little bit of apple cider vinegar and a lot of butter and a little bit of steamed carrot. If you blend that together and you play with the ratios of things, you can get a very passable, like you could even put it on top of a vegetarian-style pizza and then put bacon on top of that to make it healthy.
Somebody was asking in particular about that nacho cheese recipe yesterday.
Oh, were they? Okay. That was it. I don't remember the ratios, but it depends on the size of your carrots and how steamed they were. Getting the consistency right is always a challenge. And the trick, by the way, for the cheese is MCT oil. I forgot about that. To get the consistency right, to make it spreadable, just butter doesn't quite do it. There's very amazing stuff that happens when you add an oil like this that's a nice kind of penetrating, like it goes into even your skin really nicely, but when you put it into a blender, it makes things really, really creamy to get that like nacho cheese kind of thing. We have one more question, then I want to go into the science here.
Okay, just to say that I tried to get some ice cream in Mexico, but I didn't have MCT oil, and it was terrible.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so just as that's feedback, when you say that the consistency is important, I think it's also for the taste as well, because I know that you made it with the MCT oil, and it was great.
For ice cream making, it's an unfair advantage to use MCT oil when you're making your own stuff, because I must have made 1,000 homemade ice cream bowls in the course of getting my wife pregnant. And we'll explain why that makes sense later, but the right ice cream can definitely increase fertility. And to understand how to get like the Ben & Jerry's like creamy, scoopable consistency versus rock hard, like chip it out of the freezer sort of thing, was not easy to do, and this is the cheat. It totally works.
Yes or no, I guess, since we're on dairy products. JEC is asking, is yogurt the same? Greek yogurt, fat or without fat, same problems?
Don't eat yogurt without fat. That just doesn't make sense. In order for your body to use protein, you need to have either sugar or fat to really, for your liver to metabolize it properly. So zero-fat yogurt, it should be banned as not safe for human consumption. There we go, I said it. But if you're going to eat a fermented dairy product, yogurt or better yet kefir would be the right way to go. A lot of people can tolerate a raw milk kefir who don't even tolerate yogurt, but I would not target yogurt as an anti-inflammatory. Able to do what I want to do. Speaking of massive resilience, I'm doing pretty well today. I got 4.5 hours of sleep last night at a hotel, interrupted by 2 fire alarms, which is a lovely way to wake up. And the night before, 2.5 hours of sleep, and I've been traveling for the last, 5 days. I'm doing really, really well, and I'm actually happy and excited to be here. Part of that is that I have resilience here. I would have been a zombie for a week if I tried this when I was in my mid-20s. I wanted the highest cognitive performance I could engineer out of a diet. I don't want to think about regulating my weight. Don't want to get old and die quickly. And as I mentioned on the first day, fertility as a marker of my longevity and your longevity matters. The first reason it works, bulletproof diet. Bulletproof diet tastes good. We mentioned willpower as a finite resource. If it. So the idea of eating a bowl of grape nuts with skim milk every morning, even though you'll need to eat a lot of grape nuts every 2 hours to stay full, you're not going to get what you should be getting out of that. You're not going to stick to it long term. That's why denial doesn't work. It's easier, it's less work to eat stuff that tastes good and is satisfying. A creamy cup of bulletproof coffee makes you go, mmm. In fact, this week, I got a chance to hang out with a friend who's 6 months pregnant. She had eaten 0 red meat and very little butter for the first 6 months. And when you're pregnant, your body needs those as building blocks. So I took her and her husband out for dinner, and I said, no, let's get you the grass-fed steak, and put a huge hunk of grass-fed butter on top of it. And she made sounds when she was eating. And if you've been around pregnant women before, when they get food they need for their baby, it's like watching someone in prison eat. And she was going, like literally making those kinds of sounds when she ate, and just raving about how she was as happy as she'd been in months because she got access to the kinds of things like this. And eating good stuff is just easier. So you should feel like that. You should almost have a food high when you eat really good food. Expect that from every meal, and you'll perform better. Cravings destroy good eating. If you eat things that cause cravings, you'll eat bad things which cause more cravings. It creates a slippery slope. We've got to fix that. Satisfaction matters. And when you eat good stuff, you feel good and you kick more ass. It's really straightforward. There's this thing about hunger. When you're hungry, I don't mean when there's no food in your body. I mean when you're hungry, which is in itself like a food craving. You don't think very well because you start spending all of your energy thinking about food. And you go, I don't want to think about food. I want to do this. Food. This. And the task switching back and forth kills you. Eating some protein destroys hunger. By the way, those numbers, there's references that back all this up. And these references are going into the new Bulletproof Diet book. If you eat a lot of healthy fat, you won't have cravings. High nutrient density, a lot of nutrients. You eat a ton of vegetables. We're talking 11 servings of vegetables a day. That means you won't be craving vitamins that you're not getting or minerals you're not getting. And regulating hunger hormones, I should say, works. So you need to be able to regulate your hunger hormones. Then there's leptin. When you eat protein in the morning, you can reset your leptin. Once you're on the bulletproof diet for a while, you'll tend to reset your leptin anyway. Leptin is essentially a hunger hormone. If you're starting out and you're significantly overweight, you might need to include protein in your bulletproof coffee in the morning. And even if you're at normal weight, you may find you feel better if you have protein in some mornings, particularly for women. This is the difference between women and men. Women who do just intermittent fasting for long periods of time tend to have monthly hormonal irregularities, and it creates adrenal stress. Bulletproof intermittent fasting some days, we'll talk about exactly how to do the fasting coming up here. Some days is fine, every day is probably not a good idea. So what you do on the days when you're not going to do that and you're lazy, at least like me, is you make the bulletproof coffee and then you add some upgraded collagen to it because it has very little flavor. It goes in, and it doesn't even require significant digestion because it's pre-digested by enzymes. So this morning, I put about 20 grams of upgraded collagen in my coffee because I probably won't have any protein at lunch, so my brain will be extra sharp when I'm speaking this afternoon. When you're leptin resistant, you get fat. This is one of the primary reasons people get fat. And when you're leptin sensitive, it means your body can respond to this hormone that's naturally produced when you eat fat and protein, is that you'll be lean and you'll have energy. And this is critical. Insulin resistance is the path to type 2 diabetes. But before you get insulin resistant, you get leptin resistant. So by eating according to the roadmap of the Bulletproof diet and controlling the amount of carbohydrate you take in, you can prevent yourself from getting leptin resistant, so you prevent insulin resistance, so you prevent type 2 diabetes from coming later in life. And if you're eating fructose, which we control on the diet, fructose raises triglycerides. When triglycerides go up, then you ruin your leptin sensitivity. This is a reason that having a big bowl of fruit for breakfast is just a bad idea. This is why high fructose corn syrup in your soda is a bad idea, because of this pathway right here. Also, there's 2 studies showing processed foods and sugary foods cause leptin resistance as well. How many of you have heard of VIP? Vasoactive intestinal peptide or polypeptide? One of you, woohoo! I was trying to figure out if we had any real geeks in the audience. Very, very few people have paid attention to this, but it's one of the things that regulates gut function. And this thing controls the state of your brain, how well you sleep, how well your gut functions, and the state of your metabolism. Interestingly, at the beginning of our class, 2 of you said that you'd had significant problems with toxic molds in your environment that affected your health, right? 28% of people have a genetic profile that makes them susceptible to those. If I count the number of people in here, that's funny. 25% of you have had mold issues. This follows exactly what I'd expect. And for the people listening, we did not stack the audience that way. I had no idea anyone had any experience with living in a house that had a problem with toxic mold. So VIP is one of the first things that toxic mold breaks in a quarter of people who are listening to this today. VIP modulates inflammation in your body. If you have VIP problems, which come from eating and breathing things with toxic mold in them, if you're 1 in 4 people, then you will have inflammation that is unchecked in your body. Oh, by the way, if your VIP breaks, your leptin breaks, you get fat. Then the leptin breaks, it's a whole cascade, it's a chain that happens. So the Bulletproof Diet book is going to explain, hey, this is how the pathways work. It'll do it in regular language and say you can worry about the pathways, or you can spend your time looking at the roadmap, figuring out what the best path down the roadmap is for you, and you have a little kryptonite detector on your iPhone along the way. There's a study out there that says stress, emotional stress, or physical, biological stress from what's in your environment affects the function of this polypeptide. And here's the thing. Control your stress levels with toys or breathing or sleeping or yoga or meditation or whatever does it for you, and avoid the toxins, and you can get healthy VIP levels, which lead to healthy leptin, which lead to not getting insulin resistance, which lead to less inflammation, which leads to kicking more ass. This wrapped, it wasn't supposed to. Autophagy is something that cleans your cells. This is another reason the Bulletproof Diet works. Cells build up something called lipofuscin. This is an aging thing that happens, and a lot of the anti-aging attempts are how do we get rid of this gunk in the cells. There's a very, very easy way to do that. You want to do it because it accelerates aging. So with autophagy, you get rid of the gunk. You can do this while maintaining your muscle mass. Most of the time, we used to believe you had to remove the cells. You had to basically shrink in order to get rid of the stuff. And when you do it, you reduce the effects of aging. We are going to talk about a way of timing your intake of protein. We call it bulletproof protein fasting, where 1 day a week you change what you eat relatively radically. You don't have to do it every week, but when you do, it literally helps your cells clean themselves out, but you don't have to be hungry and have cravings and be tired when you do it. It's one of the reasons that a lot of societies have supported fasting, because fasting for a day or 2 days, or for a lot of days, will cause autophagy. But this is a problem because most of us aren't willing to fast for a day or two. The things that cause autophagy. Ketones. Ketones happen when your body goes into fat-burning mode, which means you ate very few carbohydrates, or upgraded MCT oil and upgraded brain octane both directly go to ketones in the body. That's how they're broken down. So you can raise ketones, which seems like it might be a good idea to help your cells stay clean. Bulletproof intermittent fasting, which we'll also talk about in more detail, how to implement that. Protein restriction, we'll talk about how to do that. And exercise. So the things that are good for you, we take advantage of these in order to let your cells clean themselves out. This is the I don't want to get old and die part of the bulletproof diet. Then there's bile turnover. This is actually a picture of a liver. Bile is an interesting substance. We all know it's something to do with digestion, and it's not a very nice thing, and it's green maybe, you know that if you remember that. But bile's job in the liver is to help you digest fat and to some extent protein. But there are studies that show bile also is one of the primary toxin removal routes in the body. Bile is also a signaling molecule, which is also not commonly known even in medical circles. So bile communicates with your body that, oh, I got fed fat, I didn't get fed fat. And if you recirculate your bile, which a lot of us evolved to do, that means the toxins in the bile get recirculated as well. This is good though, because bile is biologically very expensive for your body to make. It also means that if you don't have bile, say you've had your gallbladder removed and you can't store it, you're not going to be able to absorb vitamin A and vitamin D and vitamin E. So bile has a lot of uses. And when you don't have bile, you build up toxins. When you eat a high-fat diet, it increases bile turnover. This is the amount of bile that your body makes and the amount of bile that your body excretes. So if you've ever looked at the oil stick in your car, eventually stuff builds up in the oil, you need to change the oil. By eating a higher fat diet like this, it causes your body to excrete more bile, which carries toxins out of the body with it, and it's actually good for you to have high bile turnover versus less. This is particularly important if you tend to have lots of inflammation, you've been significantly overweight. There's even a study, I kind of like studies, number 17 here, that shows a high fat in combination with a low toxin diet gives you the turnover. The toxins specifically are mycotoxins, biogenic amines, things like histamine, and PCA, which comes from cooking. Next up, we get to talk about inflammation. The reason I chose this as a picture from inflammation, aside from the fact that it was Creative Commons and I was allowed to do it, one of the interesting things that I noticed in my path of being a biohacker, I've had unchecked inflammation for a lot of my life. And I noticed one of the first places I feel it is in my toes. I've always gotten blisters, terrible blisters on my feet when I would walk. And one day, when I was going to business school, I would walk the same quarter mile and I'd get no blisters. And then the next day I'd walk the same quarter mile and I would get blisters. And something occurred to me, wait a minute, same shoes, same walk, 2 different days. Why were there blisters one day versus not another day? Same socks too. What it was what I ate the night before. I had eaten something that triggered inflammation in my body. Inflammation then caused me to form blisters quickly. So you can track your own inflammation. If you tend to have problems with your feet or any other part of the body like that, if the same stimulus causes different things on different days, pay attention to that.
About bile and about other health-related issues.
All right, let's do it.
M. Walton DD is asking, what if you have bile stones? Does that affect your metabolism of vitamins and fats? And I think we have some questions from the audience too, but how about that one?
If you have bile stones or gallstones, it definitely affects how you're going to be able to digest fat. You have ducts in the liver, and when they get clogged, it's harder to do that. It's also painful. There are supplements out there that you can take that help to break those up. There are it's certainly something you see your doctor about if you have stones in your liver, though. The causes of stones are highly debatable, and we'll just say that when you look around online, there's a lot of information that doesn't agree with some of the traditional approaches to treating them. And potentially you want to try fasting, you want to experiment with what's going to work there. But that's a situation where you should see a doctor because, I mean, you could need surgery, who knows. But I would try and soften the stones before I would go into surgery.
Mark?
Dave, I have a relevant story that is just that right there. This happened about last week. So I've had this thing for like 5 years where, you know, my right ankle and foot would get kind of swollen. For me, I thought I usually wear like compression underwear, and I've read something that can affect lymph drainage and whatnot. So I kind of wrote it off as that. Been doing the bulletproof diet, very strict since like June 1st. And last week, someone made a very, very delicious smelling pasta dish at the fire station, and I was like overdue for a refeed, so I'm like, I had a cup of orzo pasta. I didn't think much of it. The next day, I didn't realize this until the next day. My right ankle swelled up, and then I realized that this hasn't happened in 2 months. So I'm like, well, it has something to do with the gluten, obviously. Probably maybe just that, but like same exact thing. Like it was crazy.
Yeah, you turned inflammation back on. Your body was healing that thing, and that's your weak spot.
Yeah.
It sounds a little crazy, but I hear this from people, and in my own life, I've lost track of the number of things like that where I thought it was normal, I thought it was something, but it's really my body's response to something else. So becoming aware of those things, instead of saying, oh, it hurts, keep asking why, because the reason you think something like that's happening probably isn't what you think it is.
Liver. I have a high enzyme count in my liver, inflammation essentially, and so the oils, I suggest, isn't that a problem for liver? High fat diet for people with liver problems?
It depends on the kind of fat.
So omega-6 is probably not a good idea.
Omega-6s are a bad idea. Also, protein puts a big load on the liver. So if I had high liver enzymes, I would practice intermittent fasting.
Ooh.
Because that lets the liver, quote, take a break, which is a really good idea. And then you'd want to support the liver in its detoxification pathways. The liver relies on glutathione as its primary detoxification mechanism. When you take Tylenol, it really reduces the amount of glutathione in the liver. When you drink alcohol, it really reduces the level of glutathione. In fact, if you drink so much that your manufacture of glutathione in the liver stops, or in other words, you can't make as much as you're consuming, you start getting liver damage from what you're drinking. One way to help yourself make more glutathione is to just take vitamin C. It's one of the 2 main building blocks for glutathione, vitamin C plus N-acetylcysteine, an amino acid.
And your product,
my glutathione? So if we're talking about a medical condition, my products don't do anything for medical conditions, but my products do boost levels of glutathione in the body.
Okay. Good answer.
Would egg yolks be a good way to boost bile?
Yes.
Yeah, because I say that because I had really bad digestion for a few days, and I'm taking cholestyramine, which pulls bile out of your body, and it's actually been going on for a week, and I didn't know. And I've missed my eggs because I've been traveling. Normally I have 6 egg yolks. Last night I just put 6 eggs, and literally half an hour later it was gone. So I was wondering about that.
They're definitely going to stimulate bile production. If you're dealing with bile or digestion issues, taking a digestive supplement with something called ox bile in it is a really, really good idea. If you're on a detox regimen or you're having a hard time adjusting to a higher fat diet, one thing that happens on the bulletproof diet, or even if people just go to paleo, for the first 6 weeks, if you've been a vegetarian or you're on a low-fat diet, your body, your pancreas, is designed to make enzymes, and it'll make enzymes that digest sugar, that digest protein. And if you've been on a fat-deficient diet, your pancreas is optimized to get as much nutrition as you can out of food that's deficient in fat. It takes about 6 weeks for the pancreas to change gears and say, all right, I'm going to make more lipase. I'm going to help you digest fat. It may also take you months to make enough hydrochloric acid in your stomach, especially if you've been on proton pump inhibitors, anything that lowers stomach acid. So this is another thing that people find when they get off of gluten, they get off the toxins, they tend to get less heartburn. But if you're still having a hard time digesting fat, then what you do is you take digestive enzymes with ox bile and you take betaine HCl, which is literally a capsule full of hydrochloric acid, the stuff your stomach should be making. As we get older, our HCl production goes down and our ability to digest foods and get the most out of them goes away. I take betaine HCl with all of my fat-containing meals because as far as I can tell, I stopped making hydrochloric acid years ago when I was obese, and I make very little on my own. So when I take it, I digest my food better and I feel better. When I don't take it, I don't digest as well. The bulletproof diet is designed to prevent chronic inflammation. There are studies that show stress causes inflammation, by the way. A low-fat diet causes stress. Gut pathogens also can be a problem, and by eating less starch and especially less gluten, you make it harder for gut pathogens to survive. Food toxins cause chronic inflammation. We have studies here. Toxins in the environment, there's lots of studies there. And being fat causes inflammation, just the presence of fat in your body. So we want to get rid of these things. And it turns out lectins, which are in wheat, which are in the nightshade family, can lead to damaged gut and food allergies. Phytates, things present in soy and a lot of the avoid types of seeds and grains, they're gluten, mold toxins. So this is why those recommendations are in place that say these ones are more red foods, these ones are more green foods. Here's the interesting thing. Some toxins help your liver be stronger. So it's not that you should never eat any toxins, but I can tell you eating mycotoxins or mold toxins on a regular basis is not going to help the liver be stronger. In fact, vegetable defense systems make your liver stronger because some of the vegetable defense systems are antioxidants and phytonutrients. So the reason that there is, say, high phenol count in coffee is that coffee makes that to protect itself from predation. And the fact that we're trying to target phenols and polyphenols as part of our nutritional intake is a pretty neat system there. So it's not that every vegetable defense system is bad for you. It's that some of the ways vegetables defend themselves are bad for us and some of them are good for us, which is why the vegetables are placed where they are on the spectrum. We talked about cooking. I mean, this looks good. I'm already hungry. But there's more studies here. Open flame does create toxins. Meat over 300 degrees, grilling, by the way, I use 350 because not that much comes at 350, but 500 degrees really does create a lot of toxins. Grilling makes, I'm not even going to spell out all these things in the interest of time, but what I will tell you is that there are studies for each of these, so the recommendations for cooking come from this, and cook your food less and gently and you'll be happier. You'll also, like I said, overcook your bacon and see how you feel. Your ankle will hurt the next morning. It's just how the body is. I don't like it this way. It just is. Biogenic amines, histamine is the most famous one. You know, antihistamines when you have allergies. Histamines form in foods. They also are neurotransmitters. They're stimulatory. They make you cranky and stimulated and agitated, but you need some. They affect your gut function, your metabolism. They're a primary thing that makes your body go and not go. This is why Benadryl is such a powerful thing. They cause headaches, nausea, allergies. Interesting, when there's protein in food and the food ferments, these will form. And sauerkraut is a reasonable source of histamine, which is why fermented vegetables, I'm not opposed to them, I think they can be amazing and healing, but if you don't know what fermented your vegetables, it's not a good idea. The number one highest source of histamine in food comes from Asian-style fish sauce, which is fermented fish. Number two comes from fermented soy. So if you have allergies and you're eating lots of fermented soy, you might want to reconsider that decision and replace it with unfermented grass-fed beef. Frequent ketosis does lots of good things. 0 to 75 grams of carbs a day. And there's all sorts of interesting things that ketosis does around neurological disease. Oh my goodness. When you're in ketosis, you have more blood in your brain. When there's more blood in your brain, there's more oxygen in your brain, more metabolic activity, and there's more waste being carried away. That's awesome. You get better neurotransmitter levels. Your heart actually likes ketones more than it likes glucose from sugar. So this whole not dying thing, being in ketosis frequently but not all the time, appears to be a very good strategy. And when you do intermittent ketosis, sometimes I'm in fat burning mode, sometimes not, then you get better performance. Fructose goes to the liver instead of to be used as fuel, like MCT oil goes to be used as fuel without having to go through the liver. Glucose can be used as fuel, but not fructose, which is a sugar like glucose, except it has to be processed. Your triglycerides, and get this, your uric acid, the thing that causes gout, fruit is correlated with gout, so is beer. The finger's always pointed at red meat, which has some things like purines in it that contribute to gout, but uric acid is a primary thing to pay attention to. You should be having no high fructose corn syrup, and you should be having very little fruit and lots of vegetables if you have gout. Fructose makes advanced glycation end products, which are things where sugar binds to protein, which causes aging in your tissues. It links to your collagen, the collagen that you're eating as a food source, and you're trying to have smooth, healthy skin, which is made of collagen, and plump lips made out of collagen. Well, sorry, fructose didn't help you. LDL cholesterol is not a big deal unless it's oxidized. What oxidizes LDL cholesterol? Fructose. Not the only thing it does, but it does. This is why fruits that are high in fructose are lower on the bulletproof diet. There's good science behind this. Supporting healthy gut flora, there's a lot of bacteria in your gut. They regulate the amount of energy in your body. Bacteria in your gut control your mood. This is why when you eat something, say, with sucralose, the artificial sweetener that affects the bacteria in your gut, it can affect your mood. You can have inflammation caused directly by what's in your gut. And remember that leptin slide where we talked about how leptin is one of the core hormones here? The wrong bacteria growing in your gut can give you leptin resistance, which gives you insulin resistance, which leads to type 2 diabetes. So you want to be nice to these guys in your gut, which is one of the reasons you eat organic, because pesticides and GMO foods change the bacteria in your gut. Micronutrients. This is my daughter Anna. She asked Santa for a stick of butter for Christmas that she could have all for herself. This is her Christmas butter. This is a PubMed published study where they looked at diets in the West, and they said to meet the U.S. recommended daily allowance of all the vitamins and minerals, using 4 different common diets, you would need to eat 27,000 calories a day. It was Jason and Mira Calton from Rich Food, Poor Food, and their latest book is worth buying if you haven't seen it. It's like a grocery positioning system book. They cited this study, which is how I found it. But yeah, 27,000 calories a day. That's a lot. So if you think you're getting your micronutrients just from your food, you better be eating a little bit more. And if you're vegetarian, you're going to need even more than that. So there are parts of your system that are malnourished right now. So you need to take care of that. And nutrient-dense foods, make them correctly so you don't remove foods as you're cooking it, and avoid toxins. End of the day, try this. Getting clean so you can feel dirty. Once you are eating a clean diet like this, where you actually understand how your brain feels, how your body feels, how the chronic aches and pains go away, then you can start finding your kryptonite. You can use the iPhone app, the Food Sense application, or you literally can just look at, how do I feel today? And ask yourself that. And then you just keep doing this. But until you've felt the clean state where you can think and feel and your body moves the way you want it to move, it's very hard to go, wow, I was there and now I'm not there. Because most of us are doing 20 things that keep us out of that state. So try it for just 2 weeks. Try it, and you'll feel different. When you have this self-awareness, you realize that you can control your environment to control yourself. And that's what we're talking about. So we already talked about the things you get from this, and I'm going to go really fast. Don't forget the compass. It's free. When you get really clean, you can just rely on how you feel, or you can quantify and measure with the flash on your camera to tell you, I ate something in this meal that's probably going to cause inflammation. Just search for Bulletproof Food Sense on the iPhone store. I'm going to, here we go. I'm going to talk about timing, and our timing is perfect actually, to make sure we get to the break on time. Because we are going to be making some lamb in about 5 minutes. Here's the basic bulletproof diet. Here's when to eat. You want to eat this diet if you want to maintain your body fat levels or just slowly lose weight at a natural rate. Slow being relative speaking, because you'll still lose at least a couple pounds a week if you have weight to lose on this diet. You want good mental performance? And it's generally a low-carb diet, but you can eat some carbs in the evenings. Here's the timing. You can drink bulletproof coffee in the morning. If you're going to have sugar and starch, you eat it in the evening. You can eat meat all day. You can eat fat all day. Eat vegetables all day. Eat them from the green side of the bulletproof diet, but you're going to be eating something at some point all the day. But I will tell you, if you take this and say, I'm going to shift it down here, I'm going to have a bunch of fruit for breakfast, it's going to affect those 5 reasons you eat the bulletproof diet. Bulletproof intermittent fasting means that you're focusing on fat loss and the best mental focus. You want 0 food cravings, and what you're doing here is you're not cutting calories. Cutting calories generally makes you tired because 20-25% of your calories go to fuel your brain. Cut your calories, there's literally less energy left for your brain, and your body will move less. Like when I do this, I'm burning calories. If I didn't have enough food, I would naturally stand like this and not move side to side because my animal inside is trying to save my energy until more food comes. With intermittent fasting, if I wanted to eat 2,500 calories today, I'm still going to do it. I'm just having it all for dinner, or I'm having a late lunch and a dinner. This isn't about eating less food. The way you do this is bulletproof coffee in the morning. You can eat fat during the fast. This is a big thing. No one was doing this until bulletproof intermittent fasting came out. The idea that 0 protein and 0 sugar in the morning gives you a different metabolic effect and allows your cells to clean themselves and all is really important, and it's what gives you lots of energy during a fast. You eat normal foods for lunch and or dinner, and even when you're doing this intermittent fasting, you can have some carbs, just have them later in the day. And finally, bulletproof protein fasting is a new concept that's coming out in this book. My friend Josh Witten pointed out to me, it's something I've been doing for quite a while, but he pointed out I was still getting too much protein. You need to be pretty radical about it. Less than 15 grams of protein, which means even things like white rice have 1 or 2 grams. So you need to look online and figure out, am I actually getting very little protein? So for 1 day a week, you stop eating any protein. And this really kicks the body into this cellular cleaning process. You end up eating a lot of avocados and coconut milk and things like that, and you can have carbs all day long. So it looks like this. You can still do bulletproof coffee. You can eat your carbs. You can even have a little fruit for breakfast. Have some salt with it if you do that, and you can eat the rest of these things. When you do it, you can start losing weight. If you've been stuck, and maybe even regular intermittent fasting, even the bulletproof diet, you've plateaued, it's because you're eating too much protein. It's because you haven't done this. I've seen countless people like on Atkins who get stuck halfway through. They do this, boom, it goes down. If you want to get the rest of these details, and you want to get the first chapter of this book when it comes out, you can register for free at bulletproofdietbook.com. I would appreciate it if you did that, because I want to be able to show the publishers, yeah, look, people are interested in this amazing way to biohack the body. Now, I believe it's time for us to do the lamb.
Yeah, we're going to actually switch now, switch the set, get into some cooking. But anyone from the audience have any questions? The internet chat rooms have been fantastic today. We've got some really great questions and comments coming in. But Mark, what would you like to contribute?
You brought up I haven't seen that yet, the protein fasting. And I was hoping you could maybe tell me some more about how protein can affect ketosis, because when I first started experimenting with the ketogenic diet, my carb intake was very, very low, but being the traditional bodybuilder mentality, I was still having my 40 grams of protein after I worked out and having a shake before I went to bed. I was not getting into ketosis, so I read somewhere like had the protein and it worked.
And just before you answer that, to build on that, for people who might be new, can you explain what ketosis and ketogenic diet is
Perfect.
for people? That would be great.
Sure. So ketosis and a ketogenic diet, it's fat burning mode. So your body can burn 2 fuels. It can burn sugar, or it can burn fat. Your body actually doesn't burn protein. Your body converts protein into sugar in a very metabolically expensive and toxic process, which is why a high-protein, low-fat diet is a really bad idea for your longevity and your inflammation. Atkins, in my mind, Dr. Atkins, the Atkins diet, which focused on putting you into ketosis, was really ahead of his time. I have a book from 2 years before I was born where he wrote a lot of this stuff, but Dr. Atkins made 2 big mistakes. Number one, he didn't look at the difference between types of fat. So canola oil, no problem, it's a fat, it's going to do this, and it matters. The other thing is that he was too heavy on the protein, and he wasn't looking at the quality of the protein. So a pork rind, which is completely damaged fats, has been fried, and completely damaged protein, it's junk food. It's just zero sugar junk food. That's like the perfect Atkins food. It'll put you into ketosis, but it'll also make you inflamed. So I found that when I started doing that stuff 15 years ago, it was the excess protein, and it was, I was pounding the protein too. I've got to do this. It doesn't work, and it's not even good for you. So when you eat super high quality protein, because you're only eating moderate protein on the Bulletproof diet, it just needs to be the right, good quality protein. Don't mess around with cheap protein, because then you won't get the nutrients you need from it. This is why I would only do 2 tablespoons of the whey, not more, and why I would focus on the collagen, and I'd focus on high quality animal protein or eggs, which are really amazing, but not mess around with the other stuff. Do we have time for one more question before we get started on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's our lady in the second row here.
Okay, I'll go.
Oh yeah. When you say carbs are allowed, what types of carbs? Just in vegetables and fruit, or?
On the Bulletproof diet, we have a whole sort of safe starch infographic, but the short answer there is that sweet potatoes, carrots, butternut squash, and white rice. Some people are sensitive to some of those things. You might want to figure that out. A lot of people, if they're not nightshade sensitive, can tolerate the inside, like the white mushy part of a baked potato, but a lot of people do not do well on potato starch, and there's 20 different things that go wrong with white potatoes that can lead to increased inflammation. I consider them kind of a riskier source of starch. But sweet potatoes are, for most people, their favorite once they try them and learn how to cook them. It's not just for a yam thing you do on Thanksgiving. You can make French fries, at least baked French fries, out of yams that are amazing, or out of sweet potatoes.
Sorry, how come you don't recommend brown rice? You said white rice.
I don't recommend brown rice because brown rice has the outer layer in it still, which is where all the naturally occurring anti-nutrients and pesticides are. And brown rice is really hard on the gut. The fiber in it can be damaging to the lining of the gut. This is why throughout societies where rice was a common food source, people who could afford white rice ate white rice, and the people who were desperately poor ate brown rice. It wasn't because the poor people were somehow making a healthier decision. It was because they couldn't afford to get their rice milled. So rice is a source of starch. It's not a source of significant nutrients. The man who told you that brown rice was good for you was alive in the 70s and early 80s, and fiber's good. There's fiber here. Eat it, not knowing that it was wrapped in naturally occurring defense systems that your body's not good at detoxing.
Have you removed brown rice off the Bulletproof diet, because I know it's on the current one?
Yeah, it's swapped in the 3.0. The white rice is ahead of brown rice. And I'm surprised the current one should actually have that swap made. I think I made that swap like a year ago.
The one I have in my cover.
Okay. It has a road, and it's something that if you make guacamole, which I do quite often, try adding just a dash of cumin. It's fresh, good quality cumin, of course, along with oregano to guacamole, and amazing things happen to the flavor there. In this recipe, again, we make a mirepoix, and you can tell I'm a very native French speaker, so I just have no clue how to say that word. No matter how many times I hear it, it doesn't stick in my brain. So if I could say it with a Spanish accent, and then you'd really laugh at me, so you're going to have to let me not be a French-speaking chef. What we do here is we take a leek, and you take the stalk and the leaves, and you chop it pretty small, like this, and you put it into a saucepan. This, again, is our pretend saucepan that you can see into. So pretty straightforward. We have the stalks only of bok choy, also in the saucepan, and 3 carrots, chopped small. Those are very small carrots. You can tell I'm doing a cooking demo. And let's see, we have a way to cook them down over the course of 10 minutes. You can see the beautiful burner right here. And when you do that, these all get really soft, and the flavors all intermingle, and it is really delicious. So you've got no oil in here. It's going to take about 10 minutes until the vegetables just get all tender, and this is about bringing the flavor out so you can do it with the lamb. When this is cooled down a bit, and this is a problem with the loaf, is it takes a little while to cool, but if you have another pan that's either been in the fridge or just a cold plate, there isn't that much here. This is a flavoring you're making with vegetables. So this cooks down to a third of its volume. Dump it onto a cold plate. It cools very quickly. So once that's cooled down, you take the meat, in this case grass-fed ground lamb, and you take 4 egg whites at room temperature, and you mix them together with dried oregano, cumin seeds. You can also use powdered cumin. Here are the seeds for bursts of flavor, and here's the powdered cumin. You put both of those in there. So you get a general background of cumin, and you get this nice occasional burst of flavor from a little seed. A little bit of apple cider vinegar. This adds a bit of a sour note, which is really important to complete a taste profile. It also helps to make the egg yolks firm up a little bit when you mix the egg as the binding agent. So what you've got here is you've got these really nice flavored vegetables that have been cooked down, and you want to get them into the meat. It's the egg that provides the glue that holds it all together. You could almost call this like a meat loaf of sorts. It is a loaf, but we're not using breadcrumbs as a binding agent. We're using eggs and cooked vegetables. You put this mixture, and I'm not going to mix all this up. I was actually going to do it with gloves on, because there's something really viscerally satisfying when you're a cook about making a meatloaf, because you get to like mash everything together. But since I haven't cooked this down, I'm not going to do it. And one trick that I found when making this recipe is parchment paper is really, really nice because it makes cleanup easy. You put that down in the pan before you mix the ingredients and just pat it down into a loaf. You bake it for about 30 or 40 minutes, and what comes out has just this pungent, like beautiful flavor and just a smell that your whole kitchen will smell. And it's not overpowering with the cumin because it has all the vegetable flavor distributed throughout. It's a really nice dish, and if you make it at night for dinner, you can then the next morning have it for breakfast if you're not doing just bulletproof intermittent fasting for breakfast. It's even good for lunch the next day. So this is one of those times when you can do a leftover, but I wouldn't save it like some people like to make a week's worth of meals and put them in the bottom of the fridge. You are going to get high histamine and probably some other problems if you do that on a regular basis. Occasionally it doesn't matter. Every day as a practice, not a good idea. That said, that's how we cook this. When you're done, oh, I didn't mention, you can take the rest of the bok choy and you can layer it out like this, but what you get is a very delicious, amazing loaf that is useful for all kinds of things, including you can even make sandwich-like things if you're going to have it for lunch the next day. You can just take a piece of lettuce, put it inside a piece of lettuce, fold it over, and eat it with your hands. This is just a really satisfying dish. One thing I'd caution you about when you're cooking, vinegar is the coolest thing ever, because if you want to take something out of a blender, any kind of liquid or soup, getting the amount of vinegar right is critical. And as you develop a taste for how a recipe is going to come out, apple cider vinegar is your friend. Balsamic vinegar is not. Balsamic has a really sweet, like intense flavor. I like balsamic. It is also the most toxic of the vinegars. It has the most heavy metals and the most mold toxins in it. So even the super high-end, extra aged by monks in a cave in Europe somewhere, still there are just fundamental problems with the way it's made, and I'm sorry to tell you that. So in order to substitute for that, to have less inflammation, what you do is you take good quality organic apple cider vinegar and you put in a little bit of sweetening flavoring, whatever sweetener you prefer that's not artificial. You could even use honey if you're going to get a small amount. We're talking less than 25 grams of honey. If you need a teaspoon of honey in a recipe, you're not going to die. It's okay. But if you need a cup of honey in your recipe, that's probably not the right choice because you're going to get those advanced glycation end products and oxidized LDL. I oftentimes, if I wanted to sweeten this up a little bit, I would add a tablespoon of xylitol. So when you get the sour-sweet balance right, even in a loaf like this, the flavor really, really pops. So pay attention to that small sour-sweet, and you can change things and stay away from balsamic.
about stevia to xylitol?
20% of people think stevia tastes like bitter nastiness.
It does.
I'm one of them. So
It
you don't
does.
see a lot of stevia in my recipes.
Okay.
But the new highly purified stevia that's come out doesn't have so much bitter in it. So a little bit of that stuff mixed with other sweeteners like a xylitol can be really, really nice. I would have no problem adding a tiny dash of sweetener to this, like stevia, but I would add it to the egg yolks, so it would be evenly distributed instead of like a...
Concentrated somewhere.
Yeah.
David, and what about freezing meals? You said don't keep them in the fridge, but what if you did meals, vacuum seal them perhaps, and...
That's your best path.
Okay.
You vacuum seal it, put it in the freezer, and then when you take it out, eat it soon after it comes out, you're fine. That's
fine.
the way to do it. And most people who are eating sandwiches on a regular basis, you can't freeze a sandwich. It's just not going to end well. But you can freeze a meatloaf, take it out, and throw some lettuce in your lunch and maybe some more butter or something and go.
I've been suffering through eating organ meats because I hear they're kind of superfoods. Are they really, or can I bail on that strategy?
One of the worst experiences of my culinary life was the raw lamb liver smoothie. Do not try that at home. It was disgusting and wrong. So, yeah, I don't like it. If you're going to eat liver, which is incredibly good for you, you want it to be young animal grass-fed liver, soak the liver either in apple cider vinegar or even in milk, and just make sure you rinse it off really well. Soak it for at least like 12 hours. This will get a lot of the blood out of the liver, and that liver flavor goes down enough that it's tolerable to most people. That said, there's two other ways that I get 99% of my liver, including the liver I had this morning. I buy grass-fed desiccated liver tablets or capsules. There's several brands, you just Google for them. And about 6 little capsules equals an ounce of raw grass-fed liver with no flavor. Hooray. When I'm home, especially if I just bought a whole sheep, okay, now I have lamb's liver. If my wife doesn't eat it all, she's from Sweden, and apparently like guts are a major part of the Swedish diet. What I'll do is I'll cut the raw liver up into little, like, maybe half-inch cubes, and I'll freeze them on a little tray. And then you can just pop it in the back of your mouth and take it like a pill, and you don't have to taste it. Because I just don't think I'm ever going to be a liver man. But I'll eat kidneys. Those are pretty good if you slice them up right. I had sweetbreads for dinner last night at the Epic Roast House. They were delicious. So sweetbreads are all right.
If we have time, are we going to get into any point of class with the sous vide cooking and the flavor wave? I've done a lot of research myself, but the flavor wave in particular, I don't know much about it, but I know you talk about it a lot.
I am definitely not going to get into sous vide in this class. We'd have to have a whole cooking class in order to do it. And I love sous vide. In fact, before we knew that Nathan Myhrvold, the CTO of Microsoft, was one of the major guys doing this, back in, 2004 or something, I was doing sous vide, and I have a laboratory temperature controller and a sushi rice cooker from a restaurant, actually. That was how I did it. But the direction that molecular gastronomy has gone has been towards one of flavor. So like Nathan's recipe for French fries. You cook them 3 different times in 3 different oils, and they're like the most crispy, delicious, amazing, like orgasmic French fries on earth. I have no doubt about it, because he's the man from a science perspective. But the goal of that style of cooking is flavor at any cost. Carrageenan, no problem. The fact that carrageenan is irritating like gluten to the gut, and it's not something you want to put in your body, it doesn't matter. It makes the fluffiest, best little spice extract, so we'll go with that in that style of cooking. I use the same cooking techniques, but I apply them towards maximizing human performance and health, and I want my food to taste really good and be satisfying. But the end goal is I'm willing to give up 2 flavor points if I get 20 performance points. But the high-end restaurant thing is, you eat it and, oh, the flavor, it's amazing, and the presentation was beautiful, and I admire the heck out of that art form. It's just as a daily practice for me to eat that, I don't perform well when I do it. So that was why I modified using the same techniques, different goal. So sous vide I highly recommend.
We do have so many great questions, and once again, thank you, Internet, for being so many engaged. So I'd love to just get in a couple before we go to break. Okay, from Josh, I have a question about intermittent fasting. I've been following the Bulletproof diet for 3 months now, and I've been doing intermittent fasting every day. Am I doing this right? Is it healthy to do it every day? Or do I need to do anything to reset my intermittent fasting? What are your suggestions for weekend eating?
For weekend eating, you can have, in fact, I recommend 1 day a week with intermittent fasting that you have a high-carb day. Because if you don't go out of ketosis occasionally, it's not good for you. You want to kind of surf that line where I'm fat burning, carbs, fat, fat, fat. Most of the time, the diets that have a cheat day, like I'm a fan of Tim Ferriss. I think his work is really awesome. But on his cheat day, he says, eat chocolate croissants and pizza. Well, unfortunately, the food cravings and food hangover that's going to cause for most people lasts for 4 days. So you'll lose some weight on it, but the clarity that we're seeking isn't always there with something like that. So what I'd recommend is, if you want to have a really luxurious carb refeed day on a weekend, buy some mochi, M-O-C-H-I. It's a Japanese pounded white rice dish. And get out that rusty waffle maker. Put the mochi in the waffle maker. The waffle maker will cook a fluffy piece of mochi into something that looks like a waffle and is crunchy on the outside and chewy on the inside and incredibly delicious when you slam like half a stick of Kerrygold on top of it. There you go, you got your carbs. Stuff like that. You can have waffles for breakfast Saturday morning with a big cup of bulletproof coffee, and you're getting some carbs. You can also have them for dessert with jam on them or something, or honey. Raw honey is good on them. So it's not like we're really that deprived on this kind of a diet. That's a good way to break it. Also, if you have adrenal exhaustion, you're not getting enough sleep, you're working out all the time, intermittent fasting every day puts a load on your adrenals. Any fat loss other than from nicotine is using adrenaline, using your adrenal hormones to help burn your fat. So if your adrenals are in poor shape, then you want to watch out for any kind of fasting, including bulletproof intermittent fasting. If you have adrenal issues, maybe only a few, like most people have some adrenal exhaustion going on because of modern life, then you can take adrenal glandular capsules, and you can use other supplements we'll talk about, like adaptogens, in order to make your adrenal glands stronger, which lets you do the intermittent fasting with the results you're looking for. But if you're exhausted and tired and your sleep isn't very good, have some protein in your coffee in the morning. That's okay. Just don't put whey protein in your coffee because it's not heat stable. You'd ruin the 20% of the whey that I make is colostrum. It's designed for stimulating the immune system. You heat that up in your coffee, you just wasted really good protein. Don't do that. Put the collagen in there. That's what it's for.
All right, fantastic. This has been so fun this morning. So much to learn. We're going to take our first 15-minute break of the day. What are we going to do when we come back?
That is a really good question. There's a lot we're going to do when we get back. We're going to start talking about supplements for your body. We talk about maintaining your hardware versus kind of the software up here, so we're going to get your hardware going. We're going to do some more technology demos to show you some of the technology and how it works. And we're going to have Dr. Justin come in, who's going to do some electrical stimulation and not the small stuff, the stuff that you can use to make people fall over. I don't know if he's going to make me fall over, probably one of you. But if we don't hear at least a little bit of swearing and moaning, it's not going to be as good as I think it's going to be. Supplements for success. Salt water. This sounds so water when you first wake up. If you're really sick or you're just not feeling so good, what you might want to do is actually have salt water next to your bed, so before you wake up, or not before you wake up, but right as you're waking up, but before you get up, you actually take this. What happens is your cortisol starts to rise in the morning, and that's what wakes you up. So right as you start waking up, your cortisol is going up, and your cortisol should go up then, because from an evolutionary standpoint, your nervous there might be a tiger. So now that I'm awake, I need to assess the situation, and I need to stand up. When I stand up, I'm going to need a lot of blood pressure so that the heart can squeeze everything and I can bring blood into the brain. Because if I stand up without enough blood pressure, I'll pass out, hit my head on a rock, and something will eat me, therefore I won't reproduce. So we have this little biological emergency called waking up. You don't think about any of this stuff, it's all automatic. But from the body's perspective, it's a bit of an emergency. So cortisol starts with that, and then it goes up. Well, it takes adrenal reserve to make cortisol in the morning. Adrenal reserve is a concept that's really important to understand. You have so much adrenaline, so much cortisol you can make before your adrenals run out of energy. If you're losing weight rapidly, you're using your adrenaline and your cortisol actually to help you metabolize the fat. So when you wake up in the morning, one way of preserving this adrenal reserve for later in the day is to have salt, because one of the things cortisol is doing is playing with the ratio of sodium and potassium in the body. By raising sodium with salt water, instead of by making it happen with your adrenal hormones, you actually save energy for later in the day. I first talked about this in broad company on the Joe Rogan show a while back, and I got so many responses from mixed martial arts athletes, people who are doing CrossFit training. I know you ever see this at South Bay CrossFit down in Hermosa Beach? Any kind of people who have added salt into their regimen to perform better?
Well, yeah, our nutritionist had prescribed that to me. So
really?
Himalayan sea salt in the morning, and like emergency.
Yeah.
And mix it up, take it first thing in the morning. So now I talk about it, and there's probably 36 people doing it.
Yeah, it's one of those things, it's not just an athletic kind of thing. I'm impressed your nutritionist must be good, because when you add salt like that, I've seen this help grandmothers, lots of people, and you said, but salt raises blood pressure, and there's a whole talk, I've got it on YouTube if you're interested in finding it, about salt and what salt does, and the effect of how a low salt diet can actually increase heart attack risk, and how the blood pressure changes for most people nominally from a higher salt intake, and how you need to manage the ratio of your minerals. All that stuff matters. So if you're listening to this online right now, and you're thinking, salt is bad, salt is neither good nor bad, it's just a mineral. And if it's in balance with magnesium and potassium, more salt in the morning gives you more energy all day long. And the feedback on Twitter and Facebook and all, for what I said on the Joe Rogan show was extremely positive, to the point that on it now carries a nice Himalayan salt because of that. Take it when you wake up. Himalayan sea salt, am I like a total hippie? It has to be Himalayan because it's like Buddhist? No. I say Himalayan sea salt because now the oceans are full of some things we don't want in the ocean. A million years ago, when an ocean dried up and got buried by a mountain in the Himalayas, there were not a lot of persistent organic pollutants, and there wasn't as much mercury in the ocean. So you're just getting clean salt. And the reason you want clean salt is the pollution, and then most Himalayan salt is not mixed with flowing agents. When you get typical like Morton's salt, they put aluminum silicate so it flows out of the salt shaker nicely, and it's chemically purified sodium 100%, whereas you get trace minerals with the Himalayan salt. As a flavorful oriented gourmet kind of cook, I have lost track of the number of times I've brought as a housewarming gift, or instead of a bottle of wine, I'll bring a jar of salt to someone, and they go, salt? Like, that's a commodity. And it's, no, this is actually how we paid our Roman soldiers. This was the first spice trade routes were for salt. Like, this is a very traditional gift. Now, take your existing salt and take a pinch, and then take this and take a pinch. Good salt tastes very sweet on the tongue. It doesn't taste bitter and metallic, and a lot of people have learned to expect a bitter metallic taste, which is just very low quality salt from very chemically processed things. So whether you're doing it for the flavor or for the effect on your cognitive performance, even on your immune performance, don't skimp on the salt.
So I've been doing this for a while, and someone suggested I add vitamin C to it because the quality of salt can vary with the Himalayan stuff, because they said it would donate electrolytes or something. I didn't quite understand the story. Do you know anything about that?
You can definitely take vitamin C emergency, and that I think vitamin C when you wake up is a good idea anyway. Vitamin C only lasts 8 hours in the body, so 3 times a day for vitamin C is a normal dose. Unless you have time-release vitamin C, you might as well do them together.
Well, number one, for people that don't know, your heart's a sodium, potassium pump. You need salt. And 2, I can't stand to put it in a glass of water. I throw either half teaspoon. A teaspoon sometimes too much, but I throw it right on my tongue and just shoot a bunch of water down. I was just making sure that's okay.
I do that too because I'm lazy. I like mixing the salt in the water was an extra step.
Yeah, I just throw it on my tongue, shoot some water.
There's a very simple way to know if you got too much salt in the morning.
Yeah.
You'll be running to the bathroom.
Yep.
So if that happened, back off. A lot of people it's half a teaspoon, but if a teaspoon feels good, I know countless people whose day has been transformed by this practice. So salt, then bulletproof coffee, and the day is different. Adrenal glandulars are something that if you're a high-performance person who lives a stressful life, you probably should be on these prophylactically. I haven't seen a study about prophylactic use of these. Prophylactic means not birth control, for those of you who aren't familiar with that term. It means just in case you need it as a preventative measure. So what we're talking about here is literally the desiccated or dried up adrenal glands, usually from cows or sometimes sheep. The reason you take these is that they don't contain adrenaline or cortisol, but they contain building blocks that your body can use to support your own adrenals. So this is how you recover from adrenal exhaustion. But if you're doing something that would lead to adrenal exhaustion and you add capacity from these, I think it's a good idea, especially during bulletproof intermittent fasting, any kind of fasting practice, or to recover from intense exercise. So if you're going to go out and hit the CrossFit gym really hard, then you want to do this in the morning, and you want to do it the next morning after, and your recovery time and speed will be better. I've also taken them on an empty stomach, but technically the food is good. They don't upset your stomach, except the adrenal stress-in formula has a particular, I forget it, it's not licorice. There's a thing in there to make it so it has a better feeling in the stomach that some people don't like on an empty stomach. So I've heard a couple incidents of people getting really upset stomachs. I've taken them on empty stomachs quite a lot. I'm not that picky about the brand. Just make sure that it's an adrenal glandular supplement. A lot of people make adrenal formulas that are like vitamin B, and then they mark it up quite a lot. And you know, vitamin B and vitamin C is not an adrenal formula, at least not the way I do adrenal formulas. And usually it's 2 capsules, maybe sometimes 1 in the morning, 1 at lunch, sometimes just in the morning. Depends on how you feel and what you're doing. There's adaptogenic herbs. This is things like rhodiola, ginseng, licorice root, and there are a whole variety of Russian and Chinese adaptogens. There's various formulas you can get out there. When you take adaptogens, it really affects how you feel. Throttle response is something that race car drivers understand. And if you've ever driven a car where you push the accelerator and instantly the car surges forward and you let off and it slows down, that's a car with fast throttle response. And if you've driven like your grandmother's Buick, I know the marketing team at Buick is probably going, oh my God, sorry. Anyway, when you're driving that old Buick, you push the accelerator and 3 seconds later, or like a Prius now, 3 seconds later it just kind of moves forward, and you put the brakes on and it slowly slows down. Your normal adrenal response is more like a Prius or an old Buick because it doesn't respond very quickly. What Chinese military people discovered like 1,000 years ago with adaptogenic herbs was that if you take the right herbs, you can have fast adrenal throttle response. What that means is that when you need adrenal hormones because someone's yelling at you and your body felt threatened or because you're going to lift something really heavy, it doesn't really matter. You can call on them and they will surge forward and you'll have all the adrenal hormones you need, and then when there's no more need for them, you'll turn them off quickly. So the normal adrenal response curve looks very slow like that, but when you're on adaptogens, you go this way, you go straight up and straight down, do it. Literally, this is so important that right before going into like sword fights, people would down tea with this in it in old Chinese military writings. The one here that I would caution you about is licorice root. If you take a lot of licorice root for a long period of time, that can depress your own cortisol production. So you want to cycle off that every 6 weeks if you're taking licorice root. It also can cause water retention. There's different brands. I can't say that there's one brand that's the most amazing because there's many different ones, but rhodiola is a very, very common one. Ginseng is a very common one. So this is worth doing some research, and I have a blog post about those I'm working on. And you basically can do more things for more time because you're not wasting as much capacity kind of warming up your adrenals. Deprenyl is a pharmaceutical substance. It's an MAO inhibitor and an antidepressant. It's also a very potent anti-aging drug when you use it at low doses, way, way lower than you would typically take for depression. If you are into ayahuasca ceremonies in Peru or anything like that, do not mix deprenyl with that kind of thing because that's not going to end well. This thing, it's a smart drug too. It reduces age-related decline of dopamine. So if you are trying to increase your performance, increasing dopamine levels for most people increases their mood and attention and their energy in the morning. Deprenyl, if you took it at night, can be a little bit stimulating because when you raise dopamine when you're trying to sleep, you don't always sleep better. In fact, oftentimes you sleep worse, or you have lucid dreams, one of the two. L-tyrosine is another one of those very common things that athletes would take. Tyrosine is an amino acid, which means it's a protein building block. It's common in all of your food. It's a natural substance. But when you take it mixed with other amino acids, you don't get the full benefit of it. If you take tyrosine, like 500 milligrams, on an empty stomach in the morning, it helps your body make thyroid hormone, and you feel quite good from that. So as an energizer, it's a great idea in the morning, especially if you're dragging, you're feeling tired, or you're looking at weight loss. PEA is an amine. That means it is something that you ought not to take if you have big allergy problems or if you're dealing with histamine problems, which are pretty widespread these days because your amine detoxification pathway, which relies on a substance called DAO in the liver, can't do it. However, if you don't have big allergy problems, you can try PEA to get a huge burst of energy. It basically makes you super alert. It'll also give you a screaming migraine if you're histamine intolerant. Let's see, you take it before meals, pre-workout, not pre-bed. PEA before bed is going to make a very long night. And one of the things that's good about this is it's a stress-reducing substance. Definitely worth paying attention to. And coenzymated B vitamins. We're not going to go into a whole hour-long lecture about each of the B vitamins and all the ones that you might want to take. B complexes are good because they're convenient, but if they have the wrong ratios of vitamin Bs for you, they can be inconvenient. What's important here is the word coenzymated, though. Each of the B vitamins has multiple steps to being metabolized, and the typical B complex has the very lowest level B vitamins that require the most steps of processing. Different people, depending on their genetics and on their exposure to the exposome, have a hard time methylating or activating these B vitamins. So you can buy B vitamins where they're already mostly ready for the body to use, and that means that they're coenzymated already. The difference in how they affect you can be really positive.
We've got lots of questions coming in about what I would describe as vitamins. I know they're vitamins here in the US. Should we take vitamins at different times, then activated charcoal? I've always been confused about why vitamins wouldn't stick to activated charcoal, and that question comes from some guy.
If you're taking an herb or you're taking a protein or an amino acid, you should take it away from the activated charcoal. If you're taking vitamin C with activated charcoal, I haven't seen any evidence, and I don't know of any evidence that they're going to stick to each other. So it's a question of what the vitamin or what the charcoal has affinity for. As a general principle, take them separately. I will use activated charcoal on an empty stomach, or I'll use it with food when I'm eating at a restaurant. Those are the two times I normally take it. If I was going to take my vitamins at a restaurant, I have a little crack baggie of vitamins. I pop the pills, then I swallow them, I eat my meal, and if I think it was not a very clean meal, then I have the charcoal afterwards. By then, the vitamins have already entered my digestive tract, and the charcoal's on top of the food. It'll all get mixed eventually in the stomach, but I'll get enough of both, and honestly, you're not going to be perfect at any of this stuff anyway. You'll get some of the vitamins, and you'll bind some of the toxins, and overall, you'll probably move your net performance up. I wouldn't take a handful of adaptogenic herbs and a handful of charcoal at the same time, because the net impact of that will be zero.